In the bitter cold of a war-torn battlefield, where the sound of gunfire never ceased and hope seemed as distant as the stars, one woman's steady hands and unwavering spirit would change the course of history. This is not a tale of fiction or fantasy. This is the true story of how a young woman, left abandoned with nothing but her rifle and determination, became the most feared and respected sniper in military history. Her name would be whispered in enemy trenches with terror, spoken by her allies with reverence, and remembered by the world as proof that sometimes the most unexpected heroes emerge from the darkest moments. When everyone else ran, she stayed. When the odds seemed impossible, she found a way. This is the story of survival, precision, and how one person's refusal to surrender became the turning point that saved thousands of lives and altered the destiny of nations. Elena Kozlova never imagined that her childhood in the remote forests of Siberia would one day save her life and change the course of a war. Born in 1920 in a small village where winter lasted 8 months and survival depended on skill rather than luck, Elena learned to shoot before she could properly read. Her father, a former military man turned hunter, believed that in their harsh land, everyone needed to know how to handle a rifle. The young girl's hands were steady from the age of 7, when she first held her father's old hunting rifle. While other children played with dolls or toys, Elena spent her afternoons in the dense woods, learning to track animals through snow deeper than her waist. Her father taught her patience, precision, and, most importantly, how to remain completely still for hours while waiting for the perfect shot. These skills, born from necessity in the Siberian wilderness, would later prove invaluable on very different hunting grounds. When Elena was 15, tragedy struck her family. Her father died in a hunting accident, leaving her mother to care for 3 younger children. Elena, as the eldest, took over the responsibility of providing meat for the family. She became known throughout their region as the best young hunter anyone had ever seen. Local hunters, all grown men with decades of experience, would seek her advice on tracking difficult game. Her reputation spread beyond their village, and people began calling her Ghost Walker because of her ability to move through the forest without making a sound. The winter of 1938 brought more than just heavy snow to Elena's village. News arrived that war was brewing, and young people from all over the country were being called to serve. Elena's younger brother, barely 18, received his conscription notice. Their mother wept for days, knowing that sending her son to war might mean never seeing him again. Elena made a decision that would change everything. She would take her brother's place. In those days, women were not commonly accepted in combat roles, but Elena was determined. She cut her long black hair short, practiced deepening her voice, and studied her brother's mannerisms until she could pass as a young man. Her years of hunting had given her a lean, strong build that helped with the disguise. She presented herself at the recruitment office as Alexei Kozlov, her brother's identity. The deception worked initially, but Elena's exceptional shooting skills quickly drew attention. During basic training, she outperformed every other recruit by such a wide margin that her commanding officers became suspicious. It was impossible for a young farm boy to shoot with such precision without extensive training. When questioned, Elena maintained her cover story, claiming her father had been a military instructor. Her abilities were so remarkable that she was selected for specialized sniper training, despite the instructor's growing suspicions about her background. Elena found herself among 30 other recruits, all men, in an intensive program designed to create the military's most elite marksmen. The training was brutal. Days spent lying motionless in freezing mud, nights practicing shooting in complete darkness, and weeks learning to calculate wind speed and bullet drop with mathematical precision. What Elena's instructors didn't know was that this training was simply an organized version of skills she had been developing since childhood. While other recruits struggled with the physical demands of remaining motionless for hours, Elena found it as natural as breathing. Her Siberian upbringing had conditioned her to extreme cold, and her years of hunting had taught her to read weather patterns and wind direction instinctively. 3 months into her training, Elena's true identity was discovered. A sharp-eyed medical officer noticed physical characteristics that didn't match her supposed gender. When confronted, Elena expected to be dismissed immediately and possibly imprisoned for fraud. Instead, something unprecedented happened. Her commanding officer, Colonel Petrov, had been following her progress closely. Her scores were not just the best in their program. They were the best anyone had seen in decades of military sniper training. The discovery of Elena's deception came at a critical time. Intelligence reports indicated that enemy forces were advancing faster than anticipated, and every skilled sniper would be needed. Colonel Petrov made a decision that went against military protocol, but aligned with military necessity. Elena would continue her training, but now as herself, the military's first officially recognized female sniper. The news of a woman in sniper training spread quickly through the ranks. Some soldiers were skeptical, others were supportive, but everyone was curious. Elena faced increased scrutiny and pressure to prove herself worthy of the position. She responded by working twice as hard as anyone else, arriving at training before dawn and practicing long after others had retired for the night. Her final test came on a winter morning that reminded her of home. 25 targets were placed at various distances, some as far as 800 meters away. Each recruit was given one shot per target. Missing more than 3 meant failure. Elena stepped up to the firing line, the weight of everyone's expectations pressing down on her shoulders. She thought of her father's teachings, her family depending on her, and her brother safe at home because of her sacrifice. 25 shots, 25 hits. Perfect score. But Elena's real test was yet to come. 2 weeks after completing her training, orders arrived that would send her to the front lines. Intelligence had identified a strategic position that needed to be held at all costs. It was a dangerous assignment that previous teams had failed to secure. Elena and her unit were being sent to what many considered a suicide mission. The night before deployment, Elena sat alone, cleaning her rifle, a precision instrument that had become an extension of herself. She thought about her village, covered in snow and peaceful under the starlight. She thought about her mother, who still believed Elena was working in a factory far from the fighting. She thought about her father and wondered if he would be proud of the hunter she had become. Elena didn't know that in just a few days, she would find herself alone on a battlefield that would test everything she had learned. She didn't know that her actions would be studied by military historians for generations. She didn't know that her name would become synonymous with courage and precision under impossible circumstances. All she knew was that tomorrow she would do her duty and she would not let her country or her fallen comrades down. The girl from Siberia had become a warrior, and the war was about to discover what that meant. The morning Elena's unit arrived at Hill 203, the position looked like something from a nightmare. Shell craters filled with frozen water dotted the landscape like enormous scars. Destroyed equipment and abandoned trenches told the story of previous failed attempts to hold this strategic point. The hill overlooked a crucial supply route that both armies desperately needed to control. Elena's unit consisted of 12 soldiers, including herself, led by Sergeant Volkov, a veteran with 20 years of military experience. Their mission was clear but seemingly impossible: establish a defensive position on Hill 203 and prevent enemy forces from advancing through the valley below. Intelligence estimated they would face an assault by at least 200 enemy soldiers within 72 hours. The first day was spent digging new trenches and fortifying existing positions. Elena worked alongside her comrades, but she also scouted the surrounding area for the best sniper positions. She identified 3 potential spots that would give her clear fields of vision while providing adequate cover. Each position was carefully camouflaged and supplied with ammunition and emergency rations. Sergeant Volkov was initially skeptical about having a woman in his unit, but Elena's professionalism and obvious skill quickly earned his respect. He assigned her to provide overwatch for the main defensive position while the other soldiers prepared for the expected ground assault. Elena spent hours studying the terrain below, memorizing every rock, tree, and potential hiding spot that enemy soldiers might use during their attack. On the second night, their worst fears were confirmed. Radio communications intercepted enemy transmissions indicating that the assault would begin at dawn. The enemy had brought overwhelming numbers, nearly 300 soldiers supported by artillery and armored vehicles. Sergeant Volkov called his small unit together for what everyone understood might be their final briefing. Elena listened as Volkov explained their desperate situation. They had no air support, no artillery backup, and no hope of reinforcement. Their job was to hold Hill 203 for as long as possible and inflict maximum casualties on the advancing enemy. Every soldier understood that this was likely a one-way mission, but none of them wavered in their commitment. The attack began at first light on the third day. Artillery shells screamed overhead, exploding around their positions with deafening crashes. Elena crouched in her primary sniper position, a carefully constructed hide built into the rocky outcropping near the hill's summit. Through her scope, she could see enemy soldiers advancing in waves across the valley floor. Elena began engaging targets at 600 meters, her first shot dropping an enemy officer who was directing the assault. Her second shot eliminated a machine gunner who had been providing covering fire for advancing troops. Each shot was carefully calculated and precisely placed. Her rifle spoke with deadly accuracy as she systematically targeted the most dangerous enemies first: officers, machine gunners, and radio operators. The battle raged for 6 hours. Elena watched through her scope as her comrades fought bravely against impossible odds. Sergeant Volkov led counterattacks that temporarily slowed the enemy advance. Private Mikhail, barely 19 years old, single-handedly destroyed an enemy armored vehicle with a well-placed grenade. Every member of Elena's unit fought like 10 men, but overwhelming numbers eventually told. One by one, Elena's comrades fell to enemy fire. Sergeant Volkov was killed while rallying his men for one final defensive stand. Private Mikhail died trying to rescue a wounded comrade. By afternoon, Elena realized with growing horror that she could no longer hear friendly fire from the defensive positions below. Radio contact had been lost hours earlier when their communications equipment was destroyed by artillery fire. Elena was cut off, alone, and surrounded by hundreds of enemy soldiers who were now advancing uphill 203. The logical decision would have been to retreat, to try to escape, and fight another day. But Elena looked down at the strategic valley below and understood something crucial. If the enemy secured Hill 203, they would have a clear path to attack a major city where thousands of civilians lived. Elena made a decision that would define her legacy. She would stay. She would continue fighting alone, using her skills and positioning to delay the enemy advance for as long as possible. Every hour she could hold Hill 203 was another hour for civilians to evacuate, another hour for reinforcements to arrive, another hour of hope. She moved to her secondary position as enemy soldiers overran her unit's defensive trenches below. From this new vantage point, Elena could see enemy officers setting up command posts and organizing their forces for the next phase of their advance. She began a deadly game of hide and seek, using her knowledge of the terrain and her exceptional camouflage skills to remain hidden while continuing to eliminate high-value targets. Elena's shots became increasingly important as the day progressed. She eliminated 3 enemy commanders in succession, causing confusion and delays as new leaders tried to take control. She destroyed radio equipment and supply caches with carefully aimed shots at explosive materials. Every bullet counted, and Elena made each one count more than seemed possible. As darkness fell, Elena had been fighting alone for over 8 hours. She had eliminated more than 30 enemy soldiers and caused significant disruption to their operations. But her situation was becoming increasingly desperate. Her ammunition was running low, she had not eaten or had water since dawn, and enemy patrols were actively searching for her position. The enemy had brought in searchlights and were systematically examining every potential hiding spot on Hill 203. Elena knew it was only a matter of time before she was discovered. She prepared for her final stand, selecting her most defensible position and arranging her remaining ammunition for maximum effectiveness. But as enemy soldiers closed in on her location, something unexpected happened. Artillery shells began falling on enemy positions in the valley below. Bright flashes in the distance indicated that friendly forces were finally arriving. Elena's desperate stand had worked. She had delayed the enemy advance long enough for reinforcements to organize a counterattack. However, Elena's personal situation remained critical. Enemy soldiers had pinpointed her general location and were advancing on her position from multiple directions. She was outnumbered 50-1, low on ammunition, and exhausted from nearly 20 hours of continuous combat. The battle for Hill 203 was far from over, and Elena's most challenging test was yet to come. As she prepared for what might be her final fight, Elena thought about her family in their peaceful Siberian village. She thought about her fallen comrades who had fought so bravely beside her. She thought about the thousands of civilians whose lives depended on her continuing to hold this strategic position. Elena checked her rifle one final time, counted her remaining ammunition, and prepared to show the world what one determined sniper could accomplish when everything depended on her skill and courage. The most legendary chapter of her story was about to begin. Elena's final position on Hill 203 was a natural fortress formed by collapsed rocks and twisted metal from destroyed equipment. She had arranged her remaining 37 rounds in careful rows, each one representing a potential life saved and a chance to hold her ground longer. The enemy searchlights swept back and forth across the hillside, their beams creating dancing shadows that Elena used to mask her movements. The first enemy patrol found her position just after midnight. 3 soldiers approached cautiously, their weapons ready and their eyes scanning for any sign of the sniper who had been terrorizing their forces all day. Elena waited until they were within 20 meters before engaging. 3 precise shots in rapid succession eliminated the patrol before they could alert their comrades to her exact location. But the sound of gunfire had given away her general area. Within minutes, Elena could hear multiple groups of enemy soldiers converging on her position. She realized that staying in one place would mean certain death. Drawing on her childhood experience moving through Siberian forests, Elena began a deadly game of cat and mouse among the rocky terrain of Hill 203. She moved like the ghost her village had nicknamed her years earlier. Each movement was calculated and silent. Elena would take a shot from one position, then immediately relocate before return fire could find her. Her intimate knowledge of the hill's terrain, gained during those crucial first 2 days, now meant the difference between life and death. The enemy response grew more organized as the night progressed. They brought in additional searchlights and began coordinated sweeps of the hilltop. Elena adapted by moving to positions she had prepared but not used, places where she had cached ammunition and established concealed firing points. Her preparation was paying dividends, but her ammunition count continued to drop with each engagement. By 3 a.m., Elena had eliminated another 15 enemy soldiers, but she was down to her last 20 rounds. Exhaustion was becoming a serious factor. She had been in combat for nearly 20 hours without rest, food, or water. Her hands, steady as rocks during daylight, now trembled slightly from fatigue and cold. Every shot required tremendous concentration to maintain her legendary accuracy. The tide began to turn when friendly artillery support arrived in force. The bombardment Elena had seen earlier was just the beginning of a major counteroffensive. Shells began falling on enemy positions throughout the valley, and Elena could see the flashes of approaching friendly forces in the distance. But the enemy on Hill 203 was still determined to eliminate her before retreating. Elena's most dangerous moment came when an enemy sniper took position on the opposite side of the hill. This was a skilled marksman, not an ordinary soldier, and he began systematically searching for Elena's location with his own precision rifle. The duel between the two snipers lasted over an hour, with each trying to outmaneuver and outshoot the other. The enemy sniper's first shot missed Elena's head by inches, the bullet striking the rock beside her with a sharp crack. She immediately relocated, using the broken terrain to mask her movement. Elena's countershot forced the enemy sniper to move as well, beginning a deadly dance across the hilltop where one mistake would mean death. Elena's years of hunting experience gave her a crucial advantage in this duel. While the enemy sniper was technically proficient, Elena understood patience in a way that only comes from tracking prey through wilderness for survival. She waited for over 30 minutes in complete stillness, watching for the slightest movement or reflection that would reveal her opponent's position. When the enemy sniper finally exposed himself for a fraction of a second, Elena was ready. Her shot was perfect, ending the duel and eliminating one of the most significant threats she had faced all night. But the effort had cost her 3 precious rounds and valuable time. Dawn was approaching, and she could see large groups of enemy soldiers preparing for a final assault on her position. Elena's situation became desperate as daylight revealed her general location to the enemy forces below. She was surrounded, outnumbered, and down to her final 12 rounds. Any normal soldier would have surrendered or attempted to escape, but Elena wasn't thinking like a normal soldier. She was thinking like someone who understood that every minute she continued fighting was another minute for the approaching friendly forces to reach Hill 203. The final assault began at sunrise. Over 60 enemy soldiers advanced on Elena's position from multiple directions. She had no choice but to make every shot count. Elena engaged the assault team leaders first, knowing that eliminating command structure would slow the advance even if she couldn't stop it entirely. Her first 6 shots dropped 6 enemy soldiers with mechanical precision. Each shot was perfect despite her exhaustion and the stress of the situation. Elena's training, experience, and natural ability combined to create what military historians would later call the most remarkable individual performance in sniper warfare history. But as the enemy assault reached her position, Elena faced her darkest moment. She was down to her final 3 rounds. Enemy soldiers were climbing toward her rocky shelter from all sides, and capture or death seemed inevitable. It was then that she heard the most beautiful sound of her life, the distinctive whistle of incoming friendly artillery shells. The counteroffensive had reached Hill 203. Shells began falling on enemy positions with devastating accuracy. Elena watched through her scope as friendly forces advanced up the hillside, engaging the enemy soldiers who had been trying to eliminate her. The battle for Hill 203 had turned into a rout as enemy forces found themselves caught between Elena's position above and attacking friendly forces below. Elena used her last 3 rounds to eliminate enemy soldiers who were trying to escape back down the hill. Each shot was carefully chosen to prevent valuable intelligence from leaving with retreating officers. When her ammunition was finally exhausted, Elena remained in position, using her scope to provide intelligence about enemy movements to the advancing friendly forces below. The Battle of Hill 203 officially ended when friendly forces reached Elena's position at 8:47 a.m. The first soldiers to find her were amazed to discover a lone woman who had single-handedly held a strategic position against overwhelming odds for over 24 hours. Elena was dehydrated, exhausted, and wounded from shrapnel, but she was alive and conscious. Elena's individual contribution to the battle was unprecedented. Military investigators later confirmed that she had eliminated 73 enemy soldiers during her solitary defense of Hill 203. More importantly, Her actions had delayed enemy advancement long enough for friendly forces to organize the counteroffensive that not only saved Hill 203, but also launched a successful campaign that ultimately changed the course of the entire war. The strategic importance of Elena's stand became clear in the following weeks. The enemy's plan had been to use Hill 203 as a launching point for a massive offensive that would have threatened three major cities and potentially ended the war in their favor. Elena's refusal to retreat had disrupted their timeline and given friendly forces the opportunity to strengthen their defenses and organize their own offensive operations. Elena recovered from her wounds and continued serving as a sniper for the remainder of the war. Her total confirmed eliminations reached 347 enemy soldiers, making her the most effective sniper in military history. But statistics could never capture the true significance of her contribution. The lives saved, the morale boosted, and the hope restored by her incredible stand on Hill 203. After the war, Elena returned to her Siberian village, where she lived quietly for many years. She rarely spoke about her military service, preferring to focus on rebuilding her community and helping other veterans readjust to civilian life. Her family learned the truth about her wartime identity only gradually, as news reports and military historians began documenting her extraordinary achievements. Elena's story became legend, not just because of her exceptional marksmanship, but because of her representation of ordinary people doing extraordinary things when circumstances demanded. The young woman who learned to hunt in Siberian forests had become a symbol of determination, skill, and sacrifice that inspired generations of military personnel and civilians alike. The village girl who had disguised herself as a man to protect her younger brother had proven that heroism comes in many forms and that sometimes the most unlikely people become the most important figures in history. Elena Kozlova's legacy lived on not just in military records and history books, but in the knowledge that one person's courage and skill could indeed change the course of history. Hill 203 was renamed in Elena's honor after the war, and a monument was erected to commemorate the extraordinary battle fought there. The inscription reads simply, "Here one stood against many, and many were saved." It serves as a lasting reminder that sometimes the most important battles are fought not by armies, but by individuals who refuse to surrender when everything depends on their actions. Elena's story proved that true strength comes not from size or numbers, but from skill, determination, and the courage to stand alone when standing alone is what's needed most.